Usually it is best to work on specific events. I've already emphasized that. Not I don't feel good about myself, because that's way too global typically, but you know, the time my mother wouldn't come to my graduation and the way I felt about it is a specific issue. Okay, the time my father embarrassed me at my 8th birthday party is a specific issue. Okay, usually best to be very specific. Anxiety disorders and things people bring in, typically, we're going to a different subject now a little bit, but typically that's not the real issue, because see, what clients tend to do is they will come in and give you a label for their problem. And they will say, I feel abandoned. I'm anxious, okay? I had an abusive childhood. And that's how they see it. But those labels are very global. They will almost always bring you a very global thing. And of course, the global thing is made up of all the little pieces underneath it. What you also need to do is to get behind that, because if to use your term, the anxiety for a second, well, something makes them anxious. And they've had experiences in their past that are unresolved. They have specific events back there where they were abused in some fashion, maybe several times, and none of them are resolved, and so they are anxious currently. But they only talk about how they feel now, not what was back then.
That's right.
Dealing with specific events has some really important features. One of them is if you're dealing with a specific event, that you know exactly where you are with that, because you know, this time my father did so and so to me when I was 8 years old at my birthday party. Okay, and so that's a very specific thing on a scale of 0 to 10. Oh my God, it's an 8. Even now I think about it, I get so mad about that. I get so fearful of where the case may be. Tap, 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 tap on that specific event. Now, when you're doing that, you know what's going on with that little piece of it, with that table leg. You've divided it down into this piece. It's doable. It's tangible, and so on. It's not a broad thing like I feel anxious. Okay, and so not only do you know where you are, who else knows where you are? The client. They know it, and that's very important because a lot of times with this, you know, they will just pass this off somehow, you know, like, you know, all my therapy finally worked, you know, it wasn't this thing you did, but so you need to keep showing the client how this worked. And so here they were all upset about this thing with their father, like I was talking about. Tap, 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 tap. Now it's a 0, it's a 1. They laugh about it. It's not a big deal anymore, and so on. Now you've taken care of one table leg, and you can now say, now we've taken care of one table leg. That's one reason why you tend to feel this tabletop way. Let's go to another one, and then another one, and then another one. And the beauty of that is you'll always know where you are, and they will know where they are as well, because you can always go back and say, well, now, how's that one with your father? The first one we did, but that was an 8. Was that still a 1 or a 0? Yeah, I think so. Oh, good. Okay, but how is this other one with your sister? Did I have one with my sister? I forgot. Go ahead.
A specific event, many people are looking for enormous traumas as specific events, but I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, well, my father looked at me this certain way and then he turned and walked off. That you have 3 or 4 aspects there, and that's a table leg in a specific event. But sometimes people come in, they're kind of trained to come in and say, where was the enormous car crash? Where was the abuse? And it doesn't have to be that. It can just be the eyebrow going up and the scowl and something that someone very important in your life said to you. And so don't always look for or think it has to be the biggies.
And sometimes that look in the eye, in fact, I've seen it in cases where that look in the eye was the core issue. You collapse that look in the eye, and it had so much meaning to it.
Yes.
That it had tendrils all over everything, and sometimes, not always, but often enough to get your attention. A whole big core issue collapses with one little look in the eye, for example, because that has meanings to the client. That meaning says, I'm not worth it, I'm not lovable. It says lots of things to the client. That's what you want to find out. What is their response to it, and so on. You had something you wanted to
say? Two things, actually, that I think are really important with what Carol is saying, for sure. That look in the eye, or sometimes when you're working on an event, the little teeny pieces can sometimes be the absolute biggest part of the whole thing, even though to whoever you're working with, they may not necessarily see it that way. So getting them to rerun every little detail in their mind, and as you begin to test when you feel things are moving forward, having them truly, I mean, you know, smells, sounds, everything, go through it is incredibly important, not just, you know, the event, but pulling it apart. The other thing that I feel is majorly important, again, along the lines of what Carol's talking about, everybody's looking for the, you know, the car crash or the, you know, some catastrophic event, and they think that if they don't have a huge level of emotional intensity when they run it in their minds or when they talk to you about it, that, well, it's not that big a deal, so it's probably not worth working on. But what I have seen over and over again is, let's say it's only at a 2 or a 3 or maybe a 4, you know, if they really work to try to get the emotion up. Many times when you start working with that, the other pieces come up or other core issues come up, other things surface that need to come up, and many times that 2 or a 3 will jump to a 12 because you hit one little spot in that they've kind of buried. Mm-hmm. So those are all things to think about when you're working with people. Just because, and I've had a lot of people say that to me, well, doesn't it need to be a high intensity? Absolutely not. Because sometimes when they think it's a 2, it is a 10.
To go along with it, I remember one case that I was asked about the lady's childhood, and she was saying, "Well, I had a very happy childhood, you know," and she meant it. But what she meant was, I was not abused, you know, I was not hit, and so on, or sexually molested or any of that stuff. I had a normal, happy childhood. Now, in fact, I'm thinking of 2 occasions. In one of those cases, what would happen was the reason the child was happy because there weren't any waves around. It was because every once in a while, mother would just go into a tirade, and you didn't dare rock the boat. So everything was always on this nice, even keel all the time. A very nice childhood, you see. There were no ups, there were no downs. It was just like that. But there's fear underneath that. But the client doesn't see that until you talk a while and you start using your experience in art here, and all of a sudden you find that's a big issue. And so now you got to go to the specific events of the mother and her tirades.